A friend of mine just texted me a quote and it said, "Of all the people on the planet you talk to yourself the most, make sure you're saying the right things." I was watching this thing online called Vaccines Revealed, and there was an interview with Dr. Kelly Brogan. And at first she was talking about vaccines, but then she was talking about psychiatry because she is a psychiatrist. But she actually works with women and helps them taper off medication, really. She doesn't put people on medication. And she was talking about her journey towards discovering iatrogenic illness, where a person is suffering symptoms because of treatment from a doctor. She gave the example of people who go on antidepressants because they're depressed, maybe just mildly depressed, and then when they come off the medications, they experience extreme anxiety and all these other symptoms that they never had before. So she says that's actually iatrogenic illness because they never had that before they went on the drug, and it creates an imbalance in the system. So when the drug is withdrawn, then people have all these symptoms. I feel that's what happened to me in the psych ward in April. When I was put on antipsychotics, it made me worse. I didn't have that before. So I just appreciated that she's a psychiatrist who discovered that putting something on something can actually make it worse long term. And she said it's only generally good to be on things short term. She also talked about the devolution of our species, and I started to write an email to her. But again, I didn't send it. So back to the Planck length. I feel like the level of consciousness in a way is like the action potential in the space. So it's a higher energy vibration, even though the length might be the same. It's sort of a higher energy, and so consciousness So this action potential of consciousness is what allows the mind to move through the brain. And then the brain creates this world that we're in. And the mind is trying to use the brain to create itself. So it depends on our level of consciousness. And the movement of consciousness is what allows us to unfold the mind. And this is also involved in perception, in seeing what's already there, or making something else salient in the perceptual field. And when we can see certain things, consciousness knows we can see it. And perhaps when we become able to not fear what we see, then we can integrate it. And the video talked about symbols, and it talked about emotions as non-physical symbols. But I was thinking about how when emotions arise in us, they become physical symbols because we actually embody symbolizing that emotion. And it could be read on our face or our body language when people observe us. And when people observe us and read us in this way, they're actually giving that feedback to consciousness. And then consciousness gets the feedback of how does this person's perception respond to that emotion, even if we are not aware of it consciously. The quantum computer is calculating everything and making adjustments based on that. So people that get to visionary consciousness sometimes actually have to become immobile to allow this other movement to happen. So their body's not moving in space while consciousness is moving in space around them. We're all symbols of the Gaia sphere communicating with each other. And Gaia knows through us, if we're looking at nature, if we're looking with unconditional love, what we're doing, what we're looking at. And when we come to this realization, we might feel like there's a conspiracy against us. It's just computation. There's a computation beyond our brain that is aware of everything, because consciousness is awareness itself, and everything is imbued with consciousness. And I feel like when a person goes into manic consciousness, that's why one is so sensitive to reading situations, and some can be feeling scary because you can just look at something and know what it's all about. And the trouble is that at the prevailing level of consciousness, most things aren't about good and empowerment and uplifting others. It's about control, it's about progress, it's about harming other people. I'm wondering if a supposed individual gets to that state, if they can read situations and communicate something that is helpful. And in that Vaccines Revealed program, there's a man named Sayer G. And he talked about how viruses are really important. And this isn't something I'd thought about before or heard about. But he talked about how viruses actually were involved with the growth of the brain. How it's actually a lot of viral DNA, and viruses are a way for DNA to exchange between species and between individuals, and they can get into germ lines and then affect the next generation and things like that. And then there was a lady named Stephanie Seneff, PhD, and she was talking about how she learned that the flu is important because it goes into the muscles and gets the muscles to release sulfate, and then the sulfate goes into the blood, and the sulfate is something that rescues the blood in a way. I don't know, she didn't elaborate on that. So the flu virus carries the sulfate from the muscles into the blood as a way to remedy the blood. So the flu is actually helpful. And I've been sick with maybe a flu-like thing for maybe 2 days. Feels like it'll be gone tomorrow. Never lasts very long. But it made me realize that it's probably doing something good. And I'm one to not really take anything for any kind of physical ailment. I actually feel like it's healthy to have a really good fever every now and then. And I rarely get sick. And when I do, it doesn't make me not able to function. And then I was thinking about then how these viruses, in a way, created the brain, co-created the brain, and then eventually the brain was to the point where we had language. So these physical viral bits actually contributed to us being able to communicate with each other in this way. Yet now so many people are being vaccinated and given antibiotics and things, so viruses and bacteria, which make up a lot of our DNA, most of it, are being destroyed. And then by destroying those things, children are being born and then not being able to acquire language. So it's interesting how I feel like language is a virus. We use it against ourselves. And I didn't mean like language is actually a physical virus. It's just virus-like in that it infects us. Yet, it could be a virus in a way because our brain is partly made up of viral DNA in order to make the brain. And then we were able to acquire these language viruses. And now we're in this big war against germs and viruses and bacteria, and we're creating all these human beings that are not able to acquire language or language viruses. So maybe they have a different language, they have a different mode of communication, but not spoken word so much. And I was saying how the spoken word, we use it against each other and ourselves, and it creates all this chaos in the world. So by vaccinating and killing germs and killing bacteria, the very things that made our brain into what it is, so it can speak and so it can communicate in these ways, we're destroying our brains. And by destroying our brains, we're not able to speak. So we've gotten to this point where we're so smart that we can create things like vaccines, yet when we utilize them, we're no longer smart in the next generation. And people can still be intelligent in many different ways. It's just interesting that we're erasing this apparent linguistic intelligence. And the linguistic intelligence is probably being erased by necessity because it's being used in the wrong way. Language is a gift. It was meant to unite us and get us to share and celebrate and sing. And we use it against ourselves internally. We use it against each other when we look around without saying it out loud. We use it to divide each other. And now we've gotten to this point where kids are being born divided in that they can't communicate. So we're a generation who apparently can communicate, but we're divided because of how we use language. And then we're creating children that can't use language, so they're divided from us in terms of communication. And the only way they can communicate with us, the only thing they really understand is unconditional love. Yet if we were able to just use our language for unconditional love, we wouldn't have created all this mess in the first place. We wouldn't have to create a generation of children who have to suffer in this way. And then I realized that these kids are likely not going to procreate, and when the autism rate gets to 1 out of 2 children, people will be questioning procreation. So actually vaccines and other things related to that in terms of antibiotics and all these things that we're trying to kill the diseases that don't kill us, but by that we're killing our brain, because these diseases that don't kill us actually make us stronger. They're things to immunize us. And I actually feel like these diseases actually give us some of the DNA to make our brains stronger too, and make our perception stronger, and make us smarter, and make us immune to some of these mind viruses that we're given. So we're given a mind virus of go vaccinate your children, and then it ruins some of them. And maybe we believe that virus because we were vaccinated and we were fine, but perhaps it's worse in the second generation of this. And so what happens is these kids that get vaccinated, it actually vaccinates them against being able to learn and see properly. And then we look at our kids and we think something's wrong with them, when it's something that we did to them. What I'm saying is that it seems like more and more of these things are actually to immunize us against having the right form of the bacteria or virus that will actually probably continue to strengthen and create our brain and make us immune to some of these programs that we're being fed consciously, subconsciously, all these things that we believe. They're viruses, and our brains have probably been designed to accept those programs. And if we were allowed to have the diseases that strengthened our immune system, strengthen our bodies, probably strengthen our minds, we would probably be naturally more immune to some of these programs. So if we can believe that injecting foreign DNA into our veins and fetal human tissue into our veins is good for us, we're going to believe just about anything. So it's almost a test of intelligence in a way. And then when we accept the test and fail, we can no longer be intelligent. And then, since we're no longer intelligent, we're not able to produce intelligent children, which will eventually stop us from procreating, and then maybe the earth will be able to restore itself. So we're doing it to ourselves, on purpose or not, I don't know. And it's to edit out language, and maybe it needs to be edited out, but it's sad that the brunt of it has to be borne by children. But you know, even 2 generations ago, you could say, look at what we're doing to the children. And 2 generations later, look at what we're doing to the children. It's the same thing, it's just something different. It's just a different manifestation of the same thing, which is unconditional love and not understanding things for ourselves about how our bodies work, how our brains work, how reality works, accepting authority. Oh, the doctors say it's good, well, it must be good then. And I feel like the vaccines, in a way, if they put the bad version of the virus in us, that's going to create our brain in a different way, that we're going to accept whatever programming is given to us. And I'm not saying this is a conspiracy, it's just something that could be happening by virtue of the fact that we're all sleeping. And even in terms of the gut bacteria, if we wipe those out with antibiotics, then we try and eat food, the food's not going to be converted into our brain cells properly. It's going to be converted into the wrong molecules, which maybe attack the brain. It's just about disconnection. It's about miscommunication. I forgot to say that editing that video of me reading that long ass document was so annoying. It was like painful. I don't think I ever want to read off something again, because I would screw up words a lot and then have to edit, and then too much pre-thought out stuff is actually ugh. So it seems language is a virus that needs certain viral DNA in order to properly take hold in the human brain. And so some brains are being disrupted and they can't pick up language. They can't communicate. Consciousness cannot be embodied. It can't be channeled into the body. So there's all these bodies being born, but the consciousness in the bodies is different. So I feel like there's a genome, but there's also a memome. There's certain genes that produce certain memes. I can't remember if I said, but I actually ordered the medical alert ID bracelet thing for when I go to California. And I'm seeing now after the fact that I think that was a good idea, because if something happens, it'll make people understand what's going on in terms of how they can understand it, and they'll give me the appropriate help, even if it means I wake up from a coma or get electroshocked. Whatever ritual they need to perform to be a placebo for me to rematerialize in this reality is fine with me. I'll show you a picture. I know I posted a spoof one before, but this is the real thing. I'm wondering if I should get a tattoo. I don't actually want one, but I might get one anyway. And when I get into fear consciousness, I feel like, oh, if I get a tattoo, that means it's an identifying mark on my body. But I don't know, I don't really feel afraid. It's just sort of a thought that would be equated with fear. I feel like I would get a fly tattoo, and I wanted to get one. When I was in the psych ward in April, I was thinking about it. Just to acknowledge the fly whisperer video that I did, which is a way of acknowledging that I respect all creatures, even the lowly housefly. I remember one time feeling like the coconut that the flies were on was actually going to be turned into a head, and I was drinking the blood out of the head. It was really weird. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not what it was. It almost feels like past realities that went by could be changed and misconstrued to create some kind of interesting story for the rest of the world. I think that happens to people. Like something kind of unbelievable happens, and then all of a sudden they're in jail, and it's like, I didn't even do this. But just because we want some good story in life. And so I'm wondering about this whole transcending the mental health system thing, and if it's even worth it, or maybe it'll happen at some point. I just feel like most people don't think they can transcend it. It's kind of like the 4-minute mile. It wasn't until somebody ran the 4-minute mile that all of a sudden a bunch of people were able to. And before that, it wasn't believed to be possible. So I feel like it's sort of like a 4-minute mile scenario. But I don't know if I'm trying to transcend the mental health system, or transcend death, or transcend, I don't know. I don't get it. I didn't realize that self-dialogue would lead me right back to where I started, when I decided not to face myself. I'm wondering if that means I won't have to teleport and have such a quantum brain, if I can actually face what it is I need to. That I won't need to be flying all over the place and my body getting all messed up and whatever. It almost feels like this in-between realm, in between life and death. Figuring out, what did I come here to do again? I've been told, I've been reminded, I've been poked, I've been prodded. What am I here to do? We need to create a different game. A game of unconditional love and support, celebration, connection. Bringing out the best in each other just by looking at the other.